Hi, John Maxwell here, and I'm so excited to represent the John Maxwell Enterprise Organization and just come and talk to you. Truthfully, I've been looking forward to our time together because this is just unprecedented times as far as crisis is concerned. And I just want you to know that I'm praying for you. I'm a person of faith. I care for you. In fact, the reason that we're sharing this with you is because we're hoping that it'll give you some encouragement and help you, that you'll be able to be better serving yourself and serving your family and serving your community, serving your teams, leading. Hi, John Maxwell here, and I'm so excited to represent the John Maxwell Enterprise Organization and just come and talk to you. Truthfully, I've been looking forward to our time together because this is just unprecedented times as far as crisis is concerned. And I just want you to know that I'm praying for you. I'm a person of faith. I care for you. In fact, the reason that we're sharing this with you is because we're hoping that it'll give you some encouragement and help you, that you'll be able to be better serving yourself and serving your family and serving your community, serving your teams, leading. That's what our desire is. But I just want you to know that we're in this together. And so thanks for coming, and just let me share with you. I want to talk to you really about crisis leadership. And, what do leaders do well during a crisis? Because there are some marked characteristics that simple, every one of us can apply them to our life, but really do make a difference. And so let me make you just three crisis comments at the very beginning of our time. Number one is a crisis. It moves us. And what I mean by that is when something bad happens, it never leaves us the same. So the question is not, are we moving? In fact, every one of you, if I stopped right now, you could make a list of all the things that are different now in your life than were just a few weeks ago. So it's moving us around. The question is not, are we being moved by the crisis? We all are. The question is the movement that we have, is it a positive movement or is it a negative movement? That's the question. Am I doing better because of the movement I'm having, or am I doing less? And by the way, in the beginning, almost always the movement is negative because we're caught by surprise. We're unaware. People don't like to have to adjust their schedules. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's negative. But in the beginning, especially, it's very negative usually. We just we don't like what's happening to us. But it's during the crisis where we are right now. We're into this now, a few weeks. It's during the crisis that we have to make a choice, a determination, and that is, am I going to continually go with the flow as I have been and be kind of swept away and with all the negative things that I'm thinking, feeling, emotions that I'm having, or am I going to swim upstream? And that's a choice that you and I get to make. We didn't get to make a choice on the crisis. And in the beginning, we just emotionally got caught up in it. But now we've been in it long enough. It's choice time. It's again, not the reality of the crisis. The reality of the crisis it's terrible. The issue is, am I going to let what's happening to me affect what's happening within me? Or am I going to say, no, I don't like what's happening to me, but I can control what's happening in me. That's huge. So crisis moves us. The question is it moving forward or is it moving us backward? Number two, a crisis reveals who the real leaders are. Boy, that's a fact. Now, I won't give away my age. Of course, I'm 73, but there used to be a TV program a long time ago. Most of you don't remember this. And the program was To Tell the Truth. And it was basically a panel. Would face three people, and one of them would be the person that they were going to describe and tell the story of, and the other two would be pretenders. And so the panel was trying to figure out who was telling the truth and who was the real person. And I can still remember, because I love that show. that the panel would ask questions, and the people that were trying to pretend or maybe the real deal would give them answers. And the end, it would get kind of dramatic because they'd say, now, will the real, for example, will the real leader show up? And whoever was the real leader, they would stand up. And sometimes they would hit it, sometimes they would not guess it at all. Well, let me just say this. A crisis is playing that game with us right now. And a crisis is just simply asking, will the real leader please stand up? Because I can promise you, crisis separates pretenders from players. Always has, always will. And this is the time where this crisis reveals who I am as a person. It reveals who I am as a leader. It reveals who I am as a family member, a community member. It just reveals who I am. So a crisis moves us. I hope it's moving us in a forward, positive way instead of a negative way. I hope that's our choice, by the way. And a crisis reveals who we really are, who the real leaders are. And a crisis tests a leader's confidence. Nothing tests a leader's confidence like a crisis does. And the reason for that is we are in continual change all the time. And so we can't lead by the book. There isn't a leadership playbook to help us through the coronavirus right now. There's none. Change is happening continually. And that's why leader shifting, I wrote a book on leader shift, but that's why leader shifting is so important. That leader shifting is how to be agile, how to be adaptable. And this is the test of us. If we're able to have halftime adjustments like coaches do that make them very successful, the best ones always make halftime adjustments. They all have a pre-game plan, but only the great coaches at halftime say, look, here's what we thought, but this is what's happening, and we have to make our adjustments. So those three comments about a crisis, the fact that they move us, they reveal who we are, and they test our leadership, that's a fact. So let's look at crisis leaders and what they do really well. I was listening the other day to a podcast by my friend Gary Chrishell, terrific leader. And he said something that I'm starting my main teaching off of. He said, you don't motivate through a crisis, you lead through it. He's exactly right. If we have motivational gifts as leaders, it's not going to work right now. We're going to have to day by day, not just give happy cliches and try to make everybody feel good. We're going to have to day by day walk with people through very dark, difficult times. And so I began asking myself, how do we lead through a crisis well? What do great crisis leaders do? And this is what I'm going to share with you. Number one, and they're not in any order of priority, it's just number one. Crisis leaders understand context. Now, of all the things I'm going to share with you, this could be the most important, but it also is maybe the most difficult, because when I began talking about how to understand context, this is not an easy thing to teach, but let me try. I'm going to give you 3 words that I think help me define what I mean by context. Those 3 words are awareness, anticipation, and agility. Lewis Carroll said that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Well, in a crisis, here's what happens. We know where we'd like to go, but the roads that we want to take, they're blocked. Our usual path of solving problems, our usual path of going from one place to another, it's blocked. In fact, you know what you see in a crisis? The sign you see in a crisis more than the other sign is the detour sign. All the time you're saying, well, I've always done it this way. Oops, I can't do it this way this time. I've got to take a detour. Well, I've always fixed the problem this way. Well, there's a detour sign there. Now, because of that, it's very important for a leader to constantly be aware of everything around him or her, and to constantly sense and anticipate, be intuitive, and to be agile. Let me define the difference between putting together a puzzle and trying to figure out a crisis. You know, if somebody put a 1,000-piece puzzle in front of us, what do we do? What's the first thing we do? Well, the first thing we do is not try to put the puzzle together. The first thing we do is we look at the top of the box that has a picture of the puzzle on it. And the picture of what we're trying to achieve through putting the pieces together is before us. It's clear. And what do we do? As we're putting the pieces together, we keep looking at the picture in the puzzle because it tells us what to connect and what makes sense. And the picture is our North Star. It's our guide that helps us put the puzzle together. So a puzzle, here's what happens. You see the clear picture and then you begin. That describes life in good times. When times are going well and good for us, the picture's pretty clear. We know what tomorrow looks like. We're pretty certain what the next week, 2 weeks, a couple of months are going to perhaps be. But in a crisis, everything is turned upside down. Here's the difference. A puzzle, the good life gives you the clear picture, and then you put the pieces together to match that picture. You just keep looking at the clear picture. That's your guide. In a crisis, you don't get a picture. There's no picture right now of what's before us. All of us have uncertainty. I have uncertainty when people say, well, what do you think is going to happen? How long is it going to last, John? I have no idea. I don't know. I know humanly, I don't want it to last very long, but I know realistically, it's going to last longer than I want. But here's what I know. In a crisis, you have to begin. And as you begin, you slowly find the picture. But in a puzzle, the picture is clear and it's all complete. In a crisis, as you begin, the picture begins to form, but it's not a complete picture. You see a little piece of it. Okay, I got that. That makes sense. But the key of getting the picture to be clear in a crisis is movement. We continue to go forward, and the picture becomes clearer as we move. That's why in leadership communication, which I'm going to talk to you about a little bit later, but that's why in leadership communication, this is key. When you sit down and talk to your people, basically your communication as a leader is something like this. Our next step is to take the next step. We aren't able to give 5 steps out. We don't know 5 steps out. And we constantly are saying, well, let me say, what we do now is what we can do now. Several years ago, I was, when I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the generals asked me if I would, of the armed services, asked me if I would spend a day with them, working with them through the 21 Laws of Leadership. And I said I would be glad to do that. And it was a great experience to be with them. And they shared with me, they said, John, if you'll give us a day on the 21 Laws of Leadership, we promise you that there's going to be some good things happen. And so I did it. And the good thing that they said would happen was that the fact that they said, we're going to let you get up in an F-16 plane and you're going to get a fly in one. And oh my gosh, that was huge. And so I went over to Jacksonville where we were going to do the flying, and I had a couple of hours of testing, and they took me out to my plane and it had my name on it. It was the generals had done me well, and my pilot. I mean, this is beautiful. My pilot's name is Buck. I mean, this is just the way it should be. They put Top Gun music on as we're kind of working our way out to take off. And one of the things that day, I spent the day with Buck, not only flying, it was an incredible experience, but afterwards we had some time together. And in spending my time with him in that process, he's told me that fighter pilots think in terms when they're out there and they're working and they're doing things. Fighter pilots think in terms of what they call the OODA loop, OODA. And those 4 letters stand for observe, options, decide, and then act. And what he was basically saying is, as fighter pilots, we're constantly observing. We're constantly looking for the options that are around us. We're making decisions, have to make sometimes very quickly, and we have to act. And when he was telling me that, that's the best way I can talk about context leadership. It's the fact that we're always observing, we're always looking at the options we have, and we hold the decisions and the actions to the last possible moment so that we can get the clearest picture. So I would like to give you 3 contextual words. I've already mentioned them, but I like to take just a little bit longer now to drill them home. The first one is awareness. And awareness is all about openness. It's all about understanding, looking around, understanding all the things that are happening right now, and you begin to integrate them into your leadership mind, into your leadership heart, and you begin to put all those voices that you're hearing. You're hearing a lot of voices, and by the way, you're asking for a lot of voices. You're wanting your leadership team to talk to you. You want their perspective. You want their thoughts. You want their opinions. But contextual leadership is the fact that I just don't buy into one thought or one opinion or one perspective, but I hear them all, and I'm probably going to integrate them. And it's not going to be just one voice that I heard or one perspective that I thought was perhaps good. It's going to be a blending of all of them. But to be honest with you, one of my frustrations with TV media is the fact that so much of it is just from one perspective. And you know, it's not complete. It's not mature. Contextual leadership is the ability to see the big picture and hear many voices, but integrate them in such a way that you have one voice. Okay, that's hard to explain. I hope I did a decent job with you. The second word, anticipating, that's all about trusting your intuition. And during a crisis, you should trust your intuition more than any other time, because you have to be intuitive, because you don't have all the time the facts before you, the picture clear before you. And I tell leaders all the time, especially gifted leaders, the edge that they have is that they have a sense of intuitiveness and they have a sense of timing. And those are both absolutely huge. So, you know, when I'm contextualized as a leader, I'm aware of everything that's happening. I'm intuitive, and as I'm aware, I'm listening to what I sense and feel within me. And then agility is the last word, which means that I'm able to be flexible. I'm able to change direction. That yes, I have plan A, but I also have plan B. And I tell you, during a crisis, you better have plan C, you better have plan D. E's going to help, and maybe if you can get an F and a G, you're going to even be better off. So great leaders, crisis leaders, what they do really well is they not only see the big picture, but they use the whole picture to be integrated into who they are and what they know about leadership in such a way that when they lead with a maturity, a fullness that really covers what needs to be covered in leadership. That's number one. That's crisis leaders do that well. The second thing crisis leaders do well is they embrace good values. In fact, crisis leaders lead by values, not by pressure. As I've looked to where we are right now, and every day I'm talking to leaders, every day I'm having leaders ask me questions. I've did a mentoring call earlier with a few hundred leaders today. And one of the things that's very obvious to me, and I'm sure it's obvious to you, is there's a great amount of fear during this crisis. And let me just say this is a very severe crisis. A lot of bad things are happening. So in no way do I want to diminish the seriousness of this crisis. And I certainly don't want to diminish at all the fact that there are people dying. And this is not an easy time for any of us. Having said that, I ask myself, why is fear so dominant also? Because I happen to believe that fear makes a crisis much more severe. In fact, I know that for a fact. So however severe this crisis is, the fear that we have and the fears that people have, I can promise you, it's going to increase the crisis and make it worse. So the question is, why is fear so dominant? And I think that there are, as I've studied and reflected, there are two reasons. Number one is we live in a dysfunctional culture, no doubt about that. But as I speak of the dysfunctional culture that we live in, we live in two generations of dysfunction now. So when we had our first generation of dysfunctional behavior in people. Uh, it didn't get into the leadership world so much, but in a second generation, now you have leaders who've grown up in dysfunction themselves. So the good news is they have some leadership qualities. The bad news almost always is they don't have the emotional stability and strength to always lead well. So fear is, I think, rampant because of this dysfunctional culture. And the second thing I think about fear is the fact that we've lost our way. We've lost our values. And because we've lost our values, which are anchors, they're pillars in your life and my life, because we have either lost our values or we have lost good values. Because of that, we're having a lot of fear. Let me illustrate. George Barna came out with an interesting article recently on the values that people have today. And I don't have all of them in here, but I'm going to give you 9 very quickly. Acceptance, comfort, control, entertainment, entitlement, experiences, expression, freedom, and happiness. Now, those are the values of today. And when I looked at the values of today and I look at the crisis that we're in, I think, oh, we're in trouble. I mean, if your value is comfort, you're in trouble. There's nothing comfortable about quarantines. If your value is control, this one's completely out of control. If your value is, I just want to be entertained, well, we lost most of our entertainment opportunities. We can't even go out. And if it's entitlement, another value today, well, I'm just entitled to what I have. Well, can I tell you something? What you have is being taken away from you, and it's being taken away from me right now. And if your value is freedom, well, we're kind of losing that in this crisis. And if it's happiness, there's a whole bunch of people that aren't too happy. Now all I'm just saying to you is, if these are the values that Barna says we have today, no wonder there's a lot of fear. No wonder there's a lot of unhappy people, because most of the values that people have today, wow, they're not good, solid values. Let me just compare that with solid values. And I understand this because in our John Maxwell Enterprises, we have the privilege of bringing transformation to countries invited by presidents and leaders of the country. And we do it through teaching values in what we call transformation tables, small round tables. Now compare the values of comfort, control, entertainment, entitlement, happiness with these solid values: attitude, courage, responsibility, commitment, integrity, humility, hope, gratitude, kindness, perseverance, teamwork, self-regulation. Now, let me tell you something. Just as we were putting a lot of red check marks about the attitude or the values of people today that aren't going to last in the crisis, you can put a check mark beside every one of those values, and they will be an asset, not a liability in the crisis. You see, moral courage is doing the right thing in face of your fears. But when you have good values and you're bigger on the inside than you are on the outside, it allows you to do exactly that, to do the right thing in the very face of your fears. Do we have fear? Of course we have fear. I have fear. Everyone has fear. There's no such thing as a person that's fearless. I mean, they're disillusioned if they are. They're delusional if they are. But this issue of having moral courage and doing the right thing in spite of fear, it's all based on values. And one of the reasons that fear factor is heavy right now is because of that we've kind of lost our way in values, and we've emotionally become quite a bit dysfunctional. But good crisis leaders, they embrace good values. Pat Lencioni, I heard him on a podcast the other day, and he has a new book called Motives. And he said something very interesting. He said there are 2 reasons people lead. And I found that interesting because I'm always asking people, why do you want to be a leader? He said, there are some that lead because of the reward that they're going to get through leadership, and there are some that lead because of the responsibility they feel about leadership. Well, if I'm leading because of the reward, it's all about me. And if I'm leading over responsibility because of responsibility, it's all about serving you, putting you first. And what values do for us is values hold us stable and help us to be responsible in our leadership. Okay, here's the statement that I wrote down in my notes that I want to give you, because I think it's just good. Be the leader for others that you wish that you had. And I know what kind of leader you wish you would have. The kind of leader you wish you had, the kind of leader I want to have, are leaders that value people, that put the people first. That's a fact. So let's go on. The third thing that crisis leaders do is they communicate effectively. And they effectively communicate several things. One, they effectively communicate reality. Max Dupree said the first responsibility of a leader is to define a reality. And what I found is that I'm talking about me now, when I argue with reality, I lose 100% of the time. I always lose, because reality is truth. Now, let me just say something about leading with reality. When we think of a leader that's a realistic leader or leads with reality, we normally say, well, this is a leader who can help us face difficult times. And we connect reality with hardship and bad times. That's not necessarily reality. I can give you reality that I think to an extent could be comforting. For example, I can tell you that the crisis we have, although this is a severe crisis, it's not the worst crisis that we've had. Not at all. It's not even the worst flu crisis we had. Just go back to the 1918, the Spanish flu. Millions of people died with that. I can give you reality. This is just as realistic as can be. We're going to get through this crisis. Yes, we are. You say, oh, John, how can you know that? Because history tells me that. History tells me that men and women have gone through worse crisis than they are going through right now, and they got through it. So as a leader, if I'm going to communicate effectively, I'm going to have some realism in my communication. And secondly, I'm going to communicate frequently. And why is that? It's because in a crisis, things are changing all the time. I was doing some mentoring to Mark Cole, our CEO of the John Maxwell Enterprises, who does such a great job. And I said, Mark, one of the things that you're going to have to make sure our people know constantly is that as you lead today, tomorrow you may have to lead a little differently. Because the changes are coming so quickly that there are some changes that we don't know until we see them. And then all of a sudden we say, okay, now I have to adjust. Again, I have to be agile. I was talking to Casey Crawford, who's the founder and CEO of Movement Mortgage, a fabulous friend and a great leader. And we were just talking on the phone the other day, and he was telling me about that Movement Mortgage, how they're communicating. He said, we're communicating every day to our people. He said, every day we're through social media, we're communicating. And he said, we're explaining to them several things. He said, we're explaining to them what's happening. Oh, this is what happened since we talked yesterday. We're explaining to them issues that are arising. Oh, and by the way, last night, this issue arose that wasn't an issue until last night. He said, we're explaining the decisions we're going through. Hey, now, we made this decision. Let me explain to you why we made this decision. Now, what's he doing? This is great communication. It's not only frequent, but it's intimate. It's opening up the door and letting people see on the inside, letting them share and find from you kind of the struggle that you're going through. The third kind of effective communication is just communicate with care. It's been very interesting. I've watched Andrew Cuomo, who's the governor of New York. I've watched him not a lot of times, maybe a half a dozen times now, when he was communicating, obviously, to the people of New York and specifically to the people in the New York City area, which is just incredibly sad what they're going through. And but he's a very good communicator. And he's a very good communicator in a crisis. In fact, just to be honest with you, just from just my perspective, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't the Democrats maybe want to have him to run for president? I mean, he seems to be able to communicate during a crisis very well. but he closes he closes his time with personal thoughts. And the other day he talked about his brother that has the coronavirus, and it was so touching. It was so personal. It was so warm. And I thought, oh, he's closing the gap between himself as a leader and all of his entire audience, by saying, hey, look, my brother's infected with this. It's coming home, and that's great communication. That you communicate the reality. That frequently you're letting them, but you communicate at all times. Communicate care, and the fourth thing that you communicate effectively is put we in the picture, not you and me, but we. It's the real corny story of two guys on one end of the boat, and on the other end was a big leak, and the people at the other end were trying to bail the water out. And the two guys that are furthest from the problem, and one guy looks at the other and says, "Boy, I'm glad that hole isn't on our end of the boat." Well, bless his heart, he doesn't understand that we're all in the same boat. And we equals, it equals community, it equals team, it equals partnership. And I tell you, we're entering into a time of what I would call mass collaboration. And the more that we come together, in fact, I want to stop here and say that I think that as this crisis worsens, I think we're really going to see, Americans get better. It's a terrible way to look at it, but I'm seeing them come together. I'm seeing them care for each other more. I think that one of our major problems in our country over the last few years has been partisanship. Democracy doesn't work really good when it's us against them. It only works good when both sides of the aisle and as politicians come and talk together and work together. Democracy works best when leaders are contextual, like I talked about in the vinegar, where they take all the thoughts and they bring them together to get the best thoughts, where they have shared thinking. And I just think that that as you're communicating, don't look and say, boy, thank God I don't live in New York City. Our area is not affected like that at all. No. If the hole's in the boat, we all go down unless we all work together. But I think people are more resilient than they think they are. I think they're more creative than they think they are. And I think they're more generous than they think they are. And I think that this crisis right now is going to maximize those good qualities in people. I think you're going to see more and more every day people doing better while the crisis, even at this time, gets worse. Which brings me to the last way of communicating effectively, and that is just to communicate hope. Back to Cuomo just for a second. The other day he was talking, and of course New York City has been hit the worst in the country. And he said, let me tell you why I'm glad to be a New Yorker. Oh, I love this. And then he talked about the fact that New Yorkers have already proven we can get through the tough times. And we got through 9/11, and we can get through this. But let me tell you why I'm so glad to be a New Yorker. And he just lifted the spirit. He communicated and he gave hope at the same time. Eleanor Roosevelt said, good leaders inspire confidence in the leader, but great leaders, what do? They inspire confidence in the people themselves. I love that. Winston Churchill, there's a leader that could lead in a crisis. I love the Churchill bunker. I just love that man. I think he was an incredible leader. During World War II, now I just referred a moment ago when I was talking about New York City of 9/11. Let me put this in perspective. Winston Churchill during World War II went through 51 9/11s. And what did he do after the bombing? Comes out of that bunker. Next day, goes right to where the bombing was, where buildings are flattened, smoke ascending, just horrible conditions. And he's walking among the ruins and the rubble, smoking a cigar, looking right in the camera, letting the camera picture all the bad stuff that's happening. And he's flashing the victory sign. And he's basically saying, guess what? We got hit last night, but we're still standing. We got hit last night, but we haven't surrendered. We got hit last night, but we haven't lost hope. No wonder Winston Churchill would say, courage is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. I love that. Number 4, crisis leaders think creatively. Crisis leaders believe that there is always an answer, and let me underline the word always. You see, we all have fear. I have fear, you have fear. That there's no such thing as a fearless person. But let me just describe the difference between good fear and bad fear. You see, if I have a good fear, in other words, I fear what's happening around me, and it's I see what's happening. It's not positive. If I have a good fear, it causes me to prepare. If I have a bad fear, it causes me to avoid. Those two fears are poles apart. And crisis leaders, they have a good fear. And that fear causes them to think, to prepare, to start to become creative in the midst of surrounding problems. Chuck Swindoll, wonderful friend, oh my gosh, what a great guy. He said, we are all faced with a series of opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as impossible solutions. You see, every opportunity is surrounded by a problem. It just is. You don't go up to an opportunity and not have to go through adversity or difficulty. And so a great leader, they think creative. They look at the crisis we're in and they ask this question. In fact, I was in a conference one time, and we're doing a Q&A, and I had a person in the audience say this to me, and I loved it so much I stopped him and put it on my iPhone so I would never lose the quote. He said, my wife and I and our leadership team, when a crisis comes or something really difficult comes our way, he said, the first question we ask each other is, what good thing is going to come out of this? Now, that's a person who is a crisis leader, who thinks creatively. There's always an answer. What good thing is going to come out of this? I want to encourage you as we look, and we're surrounded by the coronavirus, and we're surrounded by, it's not getting better as I'm teaching it right now. What good thing is going to come out of this? Trust me, if we have a good fear, we're going to find the good things that can come out of us, good things about ourselves, good things about our team. If we have a bad fear, we're going to avoid it and stay away. You know, Carly Fiorina said, fear hides possibilities. That's so true. Fear hides possibilities. Fear, worry. Worry, if you're a gardener, let me describe what worry is. Worry is like, if you're a gardener, like going out and fertilizing the weeds. If you went out and saw somebody taking fertilizer and fertilizing the weeds, you'd run up to them and say, wait a minute, what are you doing? Those weeds need to be pulled out of the garden. They don't need to grow. They don't need to take over the garden. We would say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. That gardener's over there fertilizing weeds. Can I tell you something much worse than fertilizing weeds is people that are fertilizing negative thought, worry, and fear in their life right now. It's only going to grow. It's going to consume the garden of your mind. So what I want you to do is ask yourself 2 questions. I'll give you the 2 questions that I want to talk about just very briefly. Question number 1 is, what would I love to do right now since I have more time? That's a great question. I mean, aren't there things that you would have loved to do and you just didn't have time to do them? I think we're all there. And the question number 2 is, what should I do now that I have more time? Now, that's a different question. I'll come back to that, but let me just talk to you about, what would you love to do that you just love to do it, but you just haven't had time? I mean, for me, right on my desk, right over there, I can get, let's see, I got 6 books. 6 books that I just wanted to read. I've had them kind of waiting for me, and now I have the time. I'm going to read those books this month. How about friends to call? I mean, you know, I every day on my phone, every day I put down people that I need to call to touch base with you, or perhaps people that I can add value to. I thought about you all day today about adding value to you. And for me, one of the things I just would love to have a little bit more rest. I keep a pretty fast pace, and I get that time now. I'm getting to rest. Now, the second question, what should I do now that I have more time? Well, let me just say this. Okay, here I've written down three things for me: exercise and diet. That's one. I put them together. Clean out my closet and clean my office here. I really don't want to clean out the closet. Need to. My office is in really good shape, but I just really need to. There's just some filing, some things I need to do. I haven't done for a long time. I need to do exercise and diet. That's always a challenge. But for me, one of the reasons I've always said as a quote excuse, remember the worst excuse is a good excuse. One of the things I've always said is, well, it's hard for me to do that when I travel so much. Well, no travel now, John. Hey, your favorite excuse has just been shot. So here, let me just say this, especially when I look at what should I do now that I have time. I think when we're through this time of quarantine and the crisis kind of eases up, I think there are going to be some people that are going to be very fulfilled in the fact that they took the very best use of the time they had at home and maximized the return for it. And then I think there are others who are going to say, wow, I didn't really maximize my time. What I'm saying to you is just very, very simple. Opportunities, they're never lost. People say, oh man, I lost that opportunity. I said, no, you didn't lose that opportunity. I said, somebody found it. Somebody always finds it. And so when you look at the opportunity, you're always going to see the problem, but you got to get through the problem so you can get to the opportunities. And great leaders believe there's always an answer. And they do a lot of good creativity. Number 5, great leaders embrace technology. Now, obviously, I don't need to say much about this, but technology is right now king because we're able to touch our people through it. I'm touching you right now through it. When we canceled our John Maxwell team, our coaches conference in Orlando, 3,500 people were going to come. We asked ourselves, what should we do? And so what we decided was that on March 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, that we would go online. And in the beginning, we were just going to go online to our coaches. And then we said, wait, let's go online to a lot of people. And over 1 million people joined us. It was all because of technology. And it wasn't interesting. We went from 3,500 people that we touched it without that technology to 1 million people. Now, I'm going to get out of that because that's not my strength at all. I have great people around me to do technology, not me. But let me review quickly. Crisis leaders do, we shared 5 things. Understand context, embrace good values, communicate effectively, think creatively, embrace technology. Number 6, they show humility. Crisis leaders are very open. They're very honest, and pretty much their humility and their authenticity allows them just to look at you and you sense that they're not trying to fake it till they make it. What I mean by a leader of humility, I mean a person that looks at you and says, I need you to help me. I'm asking you to help me. I've often said that one of the things people need to hear from their leader is, I need you. There's something highly complimentary about asking a person's opinion or saying, hey, look, I can't make it without you. A humble leader values people, puts the people first. And again, regardless of what situation you're in, as I've talked to my leaders of all of my organizations, I've told them people first. Not money, not profits, not business, not strategy. People first. If I lose it all, if I lose everything in my life, but I've been good to the people and I've done my best to take care of the people and I've shown care to the people. I've done what's best for them, not what's best for me. Then even if I lose it all, I'll be able to look them in the eye and give them a hug and smile and say I did my best. Obviously I didn't maybe save us, but I did my best. That's essential. You've got to live. If you're a leader, you got to live with your heart. A humble leader, they ask for help. They value people. They have a servant's heart. They're constantly saying, "How can I help you?" And they constantly are pointing to others, giving them credit. You see, in the business community, so many times we talk about four things: strategy, what we must do; mission, what we want to achieve; purpose, why we're in the business; and action, let's go do it. But there's something wrong with that picture. Where are the people? The people should be right in the middle of every decision that we make. What's best for my people? The last thing I want to share with you on crisis leadership is those who do well in a crisis, they focus on constructive change. I shared with you early in the lesson that crisis moves us. And the question was, does it move us forward? Does it move us backward? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Which way are we going? You see, crisis causes huge distraction. And what leaders do is leaders work hard. Distraction means I lost my way. I lost focus. Distraction has in it that word traction. And distraction means to pull away. Traction means to gather and to pull forward. And what leaders do is leaders during a crisis do their very best to get people back on track. One of the things I've done for 40 plus years is I've had what I call learning lunches, where every month I take someone to lunch that's bigger, better, faster, smarter, more successful than me. I don't even have lunch. I just buy their lunch and I ask them 7 questions. These lessons and these lunches have been invaluable to my personal development and growth. One of the questions I ask them is what's the most important lesson that you've ever learned in your life? I love that question. And when they give me the answer, I've asked it hundreds of times. And when they give me the answer of where they got the most important lesson in life, they don't give me the same lesson, but they go to the same place in their life. Every time, 100%, when I said, what's the most important lesson you ever learned? 100% of the time, they'll go and they'll take me to a very dark period of their life. Failures, mistakes, problems, adversity. They'll take me to a deep valley in their life, and they will share with me that was in that very difficult experience that they learned the most important lesson they've ever learned. I've never one time had somebody say, well, the most important lesson I ever learned was when I was on top of the mountain and everything was going incredibly well. I was making a lot of money and the business was growing. I've never one time had them tell me that's where the most important lesson they learned. Listen to me, my friend. My name is John. I'm your friend. Wisdom is always extracted from adversity. So when you hear a person that has great maturity, great wisdom, deep thought, it comes out of a deep valley. So when I ask that question at the lunch, what's the most important lesson you learned? I don't know what lesson they're going to teach me. I know that it's going to help me, but I know where the lesson comes from. It comes from their biggest disappointments and their darkest days. So I just now talk to you for the next couple of minutes from my heart. The question I ask myself, but the question I hope that you're asking yourself is, since I'm going through this deep valley, and since this is a very difficult time for me, for you, for all of us, where are the opportunities? What lessons am I learning right now? This is huge. The other day, I was going through again, what lessons am I learning during this dark time? And one of the things I wrote down was the fact that a leader never has the luxury of having all the answers. That just about the time I think as a leader that I've really developed my leadership and I got the leadership game down, a crisis hits and the playbook's gone. Now I've got to, that pre-game plan and leadership, it's all tossed out the window. Now I've got to have some halftime adjustments. In fact, In a crisis, you have to adjust every minute. You can't even wait for halftime. Halftime's too far away. But I just sat there and I thought to myself, no matter how good a leader we are, no matter how much we know leadership, and people look at me as, quote, an expert in leadership, whatever that means. Here's what I know, that it takes a crisis one more time to help me to understand that life is beyond me. There are questions that I do not have answers for. And I consider it to be very grounding to me. It makes me depend on others, the team, because I'm a person of faith, it makes me depend more on God. In fact, it's during these kind of crises that I just wish everybody had faith, faith grounded in God. And again, I'm not at all trying to put this over on you, but I can tell you that when I see friends really struggle, sometimes I just reach out to them and I just say to them, wow, I wish you had my faith right now, because I have peace that perhaps you don't have. I've got strength that I'm not sure is yours. Joy. Yeah. So I just want to say to you that there's a whole bunch of bad stuff happening to me right now. In fact, if I put my list down, it's probably about 50 to 1. Bad things versus good things. But here's what I know. When I put down the good thing that's happening to me right now during this very difficult time, it's not the number of items on my sheet that determines whether I'm having a good day or a bad day. It's the weight of those items. And the 50 things on the bad column that just aren't going well for me right now, just like, hey, they're not going well for you either. They're not going well for any of us. We're all in the same boat. There may be a hole at the other end, but we're in the same boat. Okay, the bad things, there may be 50 items. And maybe over on my left, under the good, there's just one item. But let me tell you something. The one good thing that's happening to me weighs more than the 50 bad things. It's not how many answers you have, good or bad. It's the power of the answer. It's the strength of the answer. And that one good thing in my life is helping to me cope with all the 50 bad things, 51 bad things, how many ever you have. I just want to say to you that I care for you, that I'm doing this for you because I just hope that it helps. That whatever you think of me, think of me as your friend, because I am. I value you greatly. And I'm just grateful for the John Maxwell Enterprise, all of our organizations, because they agree with me. The best thing we can do right now is not do business, but do relationships. Just love people, unconditionally add value to them, and do everything you can in your power to lift their load. So I hope this lesson has lifted your load, and I hope you pass it on to others. Hopefully in a short time, I'll be able to come back to you maybe with another lesson. As long as I can help you, I'll have another lesson. God bless. And remember, it's not what happens to you. It's not what happens to me. It's what happens in us that's going to make the difference in this crisis.